The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey folks, we're about to get started. Let me go ahead and launch the first polling question so we can test out the polling system. And also I'd like to hear from you if you hear me okay. Put the city and state and how the weather is in your neck of the woods in the chat box. Okay, so we got all right. So some people complaining about being hot, being cold. It's interesting. We're at that time of year where half the country is hot and half the country is cold. Kind of interesting. So I'm getting people complaining from the north about it being cold, and people from the south saying that it's warm and sunny and all that stuff. Okay, perfect. All right, cool. All right, so we got the first polling question up. This will be the first of four. Remember, you only need to answer three polling questions for your CPE certificate. So, all right, let me go ahead and close that up. So please answer the first polling question. And just to share the results real quick, we have 81% are accounting professionals, consultants working with clients, 11% or 12% accounting professionals that are employed somewhere, and the rest other miscellaneous, maybe even some small business owners sprinkled here and there. Interesting enough, QE Power Hour became an accountant's webinar over time, and it never really was meant to that specifically. So that actually ended up being a pretty good turn of events. Okay, so I'm going to start the recording. You're going to hear a brief silence, and we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to QB Power Hour. Today's Thursday, October 18th, 2018, and today's episode is Sales Tax in QuickBooks Online. We're going to spend about a few minutes talking about QB Power Hour and the sponsors. Then we'll talk about the CPE process, and then we'll talk about the main content and learning objectives, which will be QuickBooks Online Sales Tax. Sorry, the slides were not updated, but it will be QuickBooks Online Sales Tax, the setup and the payment process. So we'll go ahead and cover that. Couple of important things to just keep in mind. The next couple of episodes, we're going to have Avalara on next week. So this is next week, because we're usually twice a month, every other week. But in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and have next week, and it's going to be a special deep dive episode into the Avalara products called AvaTax, which allows you to automatically calculate sales tax in QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online, and is mostly geared towards sort of e-commerce, multi-state type of solutions. And that will be a good contrast with what QuickBooks can do on its own and what you would need a third-party app to do that. Okay, so and then we're going to go into a regular episode on November 1st, which is an episode I'm putting together, which is creating options and offering packages for accountants. So I'm going to give you a quick preview of my process and how I offer fixed rates to my customers with a very specific template that I use to present the packages. So you don't want to miss that if you are in the process of moving to a value pricing type of practice. Now, QB Power Hour is typically tips, tricks, and advanced insights in the world of QuickBooks. We try to split 50% desktop, 50% online. Today's episode will be 100% online. And from time to time, we'll have special guests, third-party apps, practice management, or other industry-related topics. Mashal Long is a co-host. She's not with us live today, but definitely check out her LinkedIn group that has over 160,000 members, and check out all her 5 books that she has on Amazon. And the name of her company is Long for Success. You can find information about her at longforsuccess.com. About myself, I live and work in the Miami, Florida area. I teach QuickBooks in my own classroom. You can check out my website there. There's my email if you have any questions related to QuickBooks, accounting, whatever happens to be, and my Twitter handle. I'm pretty accessible. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer or do my best to answer those questions. About CPE, we do give CPE. So if you're a CPA or certified bookkeeper and you attend the webinar live, only live, not YouTube recordings, if you're logged in for 50 minutes and answer at least 3 out of the 4 polling questions, we will send you the certificate. We're officially behind a month, so we owe people 2 to 3 certificates. So I'll try to get them done this weekend. It's just been a crazy extension tax season for me to get those done. About our sponsor, Avalara is sponsoring our webinar for the rest of the year. So we thank Avalara for that. They are the most popular app or service, they're kind of both, to manage multi-state sales tax compliance. Avalara.com, check them out. Now, a couple of things I wanted to include in the slides. There's 3 videos that Intuit put together. They're about 2 to 3 minutes each, where they walk you through online sales tax tutorials. So if you miss anything in this tutorial, in this webinar, go back and check out those videos. And of course, this is going to be recorded. You can watch that later. So I took it upon myself to find those videos in YouTube and put the links there to make it easy for you to find that content. Now, there's 2 really important pieces of information that are worth noting. In October 2017, Intuit purchased a company called Exactor, which is kind of like a mini Avalara. I actually never heard of them before QuickBooks bought them. And you start to notice that there are some sort of automation features being added to QuickBooks Online. I personally, and I'm okay to say this in public, I am not comfortable with it completely. I just haven't tested it or have enough clients on it to feel that it's a complete tool, such as an Avalara type of system. But in today's presentation, I'm going to kind of show you everything, and you have an idea of what it can do and what the limitations are. I believe the best written guide on what the new updated sales tax feature looks like was written by Charlie Russell from the Accountex Network. So I put the link there to his article. Check that out. He's really, really good and methodical to explain everything that was changed and updated on the fall of last year. So we've had this new feature for a whole year. The interesting thing about it is that not everybody's on it because some people are still in the old system. So as you watch the demo, if your sales tax system looks different, that means you're in the old system and you may need to call to have them upgrade to the new system. Interestingly enough, if you set up a brand new QuickBooks Online file, it only goes into the new system. So not everybody has been migrated to the new system. I hear a few people have given me feedback saying that they're still in the old system. Okay. So that being said, let's go ahead and run another polling question, just real quick, get an idea more or less. Have you used the new QuickBooks Online sales tax feature? Right. So I would like to know if you know. If you don't, doesn't matter what answer you put there, but I like to know more or less if you have used the QuickBooks Online new sales tax system. Give me an idea more or less, and this is a polling question, so we need an answer in order to get your CPE certificates. And I'm getting some feedback. Some people are saying that they are in the old system, but it does prompt you to switch to the new system. So it's really kind of up to you. So you should have the prompt to upgrade to the new system. Or if you don't know any better, like if you haven't used it for 2 years, you won't know the difference. Like if you only started using QuickBooks Online in the last year or so, then the only thing you've seen is probably the new system. But some of the QuickBooks Online files that were created before of November of last year, they would still be in the old system. All right, we got about 91% of the votes. I'd like to get to 95%. It's been about a minute. I'll leave the polling question for another 10 or 15 seconds so we can go pretty long uninterrupted until we have to ask the next polling question. All right, so I'm going to close the polling question. For those that need a CPE, make sure you answer something. Going once, going twice. Done. I'll share the results real quick. I got feedback from people that they want to see those results. For some folks is valuable. So 10% of you don't use QuickBooks Online at all. Okay, understandable. It looks like a big percentage of you either don't deal with sales tax or are in the old system. 10% of you love it, and 15% of you are not happy with it. So I assume that the 15% of you will have all sorts of comments and questions because I know I've seen fair share of frustrations with new system. Hey, all change is hard. Okay, so I'm gonna what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a demonstration starting from zero, just so I want you to kind of see the entire experience. So I'm gonna set up a brand new QuickBooks Online file from zero and kind of go from there. I usually, when I set up a new QuickBooks Online file, I go to a domain name that I bought in order to forward to a special backlink, which is QuickBooks50.com. When I go to QuickBooks50.com, it takes me to this page that allows me to set up a free trial. And if for whatever reason, if I'm doing this for a client and they decide to keep it, it gives them 50% off for the entire year. So that in itself, in my opinion, is just really valuable. So I'm going to start a free trial of QuickBooks Online Plus and do it from there. So let me go ahead and set that up. I'm going to go ahead and log in with my credentials so I don't have to create a new account. And this is going to create a brand new QuickBooks Online file for me. So I'm going to, again, I'm going through the process from zero. If you want to ask some questions in the interim, I'll answer them. You are going to see a brand new QuickBooks Online setup from zero, just because I want you to see it just from scratch. That way, there's no potential other things that were created in an existing file to do that. So I'm gonna do set up. I'm gonna set up my own company. I'm gonna give it a name. I'm gonna call it Tax Company Demo. Call it Tax Company Demo. I'll put here that it's less than a year, so it doesn't ask me to upgrade or anything like that. And then I'll click on Next. Okay, then I'm gonna click on All Set because those questions don't really matter, and I'm good to go with a brand new fresh file. So that's a 30-day trial. So a couple of things that I do. The first thing I do is I'm going to click on taxes. Okay, I'm going to click on taxes, and right off the bat, when I click on taxes, because I don't have payroll, there won't be any questions regarding payroll. Okay. Just real quick, I have a person saying that they can't see my screen. Can you confirm that you can see my screen? Sorry, I just want to make sure that may be an isolated thing. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, Karen. I think it's your computer. Okay. So anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on set up sales tax. I'm gonna click on that. And this is what the new system looks like. It tells you, asks you first for your physical address. So I'm gonna put my physical address here, and this is really important because when we deal with sales tax, the starting point of all sales tax management is your home address, because your home address itself is the one that's going to automatically tell you whether or not you're selling in that state, and it's going to charge the sales tax for that state. But then it's going to ask you sort of the magical question, right? So it's saying, I'm assuming that you are going to sell in Florida because you turn on sales tax and your state is in Florida, but it says, do you sell products in other states? Now there's a learn more link there that sends you to a sort of like a little uh, help button. I don't find this to be enough information to be really useful, but hey, that's there for a few folks that need that clarification. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on yes. So I'm clicking on yes, and then I'm gonna create my other jurisdictions here. Okay, so my first original jurisdiction here in which I probably have Nexus is Florida Department of Revenue, because that's the home state that I put. Then I have to put my filing frequency. So I'm going to go ahead and put that I file monthly. And then the starting tax period, I'm just going to do January just to get that started. And then the start date, I'll put January 2018. Of course, you probably want to put the actual period in which you're officially starting to do sales tax. So that way it doesn't kind of go back. It's really up to you there. And then we're going to click on Add Agency. Okay, we're going to click on Add Agency. And in Add Agency, I'm going to add another agency, another state per se that I'm dealing with. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Agency. And then under Agency, I'm going to search it. Now, one thing I found kind of interesting, and I live in Florida and I deal with mostly Florida sales tax. We don't file in a city basis or in a quarterly basis. I've heard that there are counties where you have to file sales tax in that specific county on top of the state, or you have to file sales tax um, in a city. Now I don't know about that, so I don't want to speak intelligently or not intelligently around it. So I'm just going to pick a state in which I know that I file in a state level. So I'm going to pick New York here. And then on the file frequency, I'm going to also select monthly. And then on the start date, I'll do, let's say, 01/01 2018. So I'm just going to kind of be consistent in terms of what my start dates are. Now, this tells me here, start of tax period March. I honestly have no idea what this is. This may be a weird New York thing where I don't know what this is. Like I don't have the QuickBooks doesn't let me change it, so I really don't know what's meant behind that. I guess people dealing with sales tax in other states, that could be a thing. We'll see. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on save. And then for some reason, some of these things don't populate right off the bat. So the system's kind of broken. So I have to go back and put monthly and January and put this stuff again. Again, I don't understand why this is. This is just how it is. I have to deal with that. So you have to make sure that you look at this screen and everything makes sense in this case. Now, somebody is saying that on the New York thing, it's because the way their fiscal year is March to February. So they're saying that it needs to end in this kind of odd month. So I guess that makes sense. All right, thank you for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and then it's going to set up everything kind of in the background, and it's going to get you set up. Okay, so now that is officially set up, you're going to have two, you should in theory have two, well, whoops. Okay, so you're going to have two jurisdictions. You're going to have Florida and New York, because I told it that my setup goes all the way back to January. QuickBooks Online is not automatically assuming that my sales tax is correct. So it's going to set up all my sort of my monthly reports or my monthly back dating, my monthly liabilities in here. So you're going to see each month for the state. You're going to see, in this case, you see the month for New York. So you see everything gets automatically populated. Now, if I click on sales tax settings, and I can actually change that. So I can click on edit, and I can go back and say, you know what, my start date in this one's going to be September. That way I don't want it to automatically generate all that. So that will be up to you, really. If when you're setting this up, you're going to go back all the way to that. And then I'll do the same thing for New York. I'll try to bring this back to, let's see if it lets me do September. I'm not sure if New York is that type of month where I can start in September. Let me try that. That way I don't see so many things on my screen. It looks like that works. So let me go back to sales tax, and that should clean up my screen. Perfect. That will clean up my screen and only show me what's due now and what's upcoming due. So those start dates will create the sort of the backtrack. And this varies by state. That's another important thing to mention. This varies by state. So I'll create the backtrack, the reports, and the liability. So you actually have to enter all those. Okay, so far, so good. Let me tell you the next thing that I do, and this is more of a sort of personal preference. I always set up my sales tax accounts in the chart of accounts before moving forward. So I'm going to go into my chart of accounts. And what I'm going to do here in the chart of accounts is I'm going to set up the sales tax accounts that I'm missing. So generally, when you click on sales tax, QuickBooks automatically is going to create my Florida Department of Revenue payable, sales tax payable, and my New York Department of Revenue sales tax payable. So it's actually going to create a liability account for every one of the states that I owe money to, and it's going to put all that money into that bucket. So that's really important to know. But there's two missing accounts that I have, and one of them you all should create it, and the other one it depends on the company. So I'm going to create the first one. Everybody needs to have this one. There should be an other income account called sales tax credit allowance. And the way it works in Florida, for example, if you file on time and you file digitally, they're going to give you sort of a credit, right? They're going to give you a credit. They're going to give you money. They're going to help you make money as an agent of the business. So when you adjust those sales tax returns, that needs to go into income. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create sales tax compliance, and then click on save and close. So that's going to be an other income account, and that's only when I have to adjust my sales tax liability. I'm going to put it into that sales tax credit allowance account. The other one I create, and this is not necessarily for everyone, it depends on the type of business. If you're running a business in which you don't create QuickBooks invoices or QuickBooks sales receipts, again, a business that does not create QuickBooks invoices or QuickBooks sales receipts, and the income is being calculated through some other system, maybe a POS system, an e-commerce system, maybe by hand, whatever, and you are collecting sales tax, but you're not using QuickBooks to calculate sales tax, then I create an income account called sales tax paid. And basically what this is if I'm when every time I receive income, it's all tax inclusive and I'm putting that into an income account. Once I pay my sales tax, I'm going to hit my sales tax paid account so it nets out my sales to net of sales tax. Again, this is only, and please don't get confused, this is only if you don't create invoices, if you don't create sales receipts in QuickBooks already and you are receiving income from some other system and that income is sort of tax inclusive. So that's a really important piece. That's only for those people. Okay. So let me go ahead and hit save and close. So I create those sales tax accounts while I'm at it. Okay. So let's go and let's start creating some invoices so we can kind of see how this works. I'm going to click on quick create and then I'll click on invoice. I'll create a new invoice here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new customer. And the new customer creation is a really important process because this is where I'm going to put the location of the customer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add new. And I'm going to click on details because I want to see the full screen. And I'm going to put Carlos Gomez, and then I'm gonna have a billing address and a ship to address. So in the event that the ship to address is the same as the billing address, QuickBooks will use the ship to address as a default place where it's going to charge sales tax. Okay. If I use a billing address separate from the shipping address, it will also only use the shipping address. So let's say, for example, this particular customer has a billing address in Florida. So just for the heck of it, let's just do that. 500 Main Street, and then I'll just make up here a city, state, and a zip code. And they're going to have a different billing address. Let's say the billing address is going to be 1 Broadway, and that's going to be in New York, and the zip code 1101. So I hope that's all correct. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on save, and I created my customer that has a billing address, and there's also an optional shipping address. So that's actually a really important component of this whole thing. And you really, really have to make sure that is clear. Okay, that's really, really clear. So you have a billing address, you have a shipping address, and QuickBooks is going to pick it based on the shipping address, not the billing address. So I'm going to backdate this to September, and I'm going to select the product. Now, by default, QuickBooks creates two service items, in this case called hours and sales. Something I forgot to do, I probably should have done this before, was to create my items, but I'll do it here on the spot. So I'm going to click on add new, and I'll create a non-inventory item, and I'm going to call this widget 1. And I'm going to go down here where it says is taxable. So you can see right there where it says is taxable. This is where I pick whether the item as a whole is by default taxable or not. Now, whether I mark this taxable or not, that does not affect my sales tax yet. This only affects my sales tax in the form itself. So in the invoice, in the sales order, if the checkbox is there, that's when sales tax gets affected. This is just for like the default setting of it. Now, when I click on is taxable, I have an option to select this thing called sales category. Now, this thing is kind of a monster. There's a whole bunch of questions, a whole bunch of possibilities. I find most QuickBooks users get utterly confused by this whole thing because it actually is actually asking you the type of product, the type of service, and it goes pretty deep. Like, for example, if I pick retail and then I click on the drop-down menu, look at all these different options that it has. Shoes, hats, tennis clothing, inventory donation, U.S. flags, state flags. I mean, there's so many options here, and I really I assume, and this is why I'm not ready to like just give my full opinion about the software, but I assume that there's a database somewhere that depending on the product type and depending on the state and depending on the county, QuickBooks will kind of guide you to the process of figuring out whether the item is taxable or not. The problem that I have with that, especially with tax professionals, is that uh, we could offer a client a sales tax service, sales tax consultation service, and this makes the illusion or the assumption that QuickBooks will do everything for you as long as you select the right answers. But I still have my reservations in terms of how exact or how good this is, I'm going to make the assumption that this is all correct. Now, I did find one that was my go-to one. This one called taxable retail item. So if I'm unsure about it, I just kind of put retail, taxable retail item, and that's what I choose because just going through that list makes my head hurt. It absolutely makes my head hurt. So right now I'm choosing retail or that. But one thing to note is you can leave that blank. That's also it's an option. You don't have to put it. The list is kind of crazy. Now a couple of things. The list is not in alphabetical order. It's not searchable. I can actually type. So if I type flag, it does kind of create a filtering system. So it is. Well, I'll take it back. It's kind of it is searchable, but I just don't. I just have an issue with how complicated this list is. And again, sales tax is complicated. The sales tax world is complicated. That's absolutely right. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save and close. Okay, and then that's because we made that taxable. That's gonna be the default tax rate of the state. So let me go ahead and make this $1,000. And right here where it says sales tax, you will notice that QuickBooks automatically calculated sales tax for you at 88.75. And it did that based on the shipping address. Now, if I click on sales tax, there's a little link there. And by the way, that little link is everything. This is the keys to the kingdom there. That little link there. If I click on that little link there, it's going to ask me a couple of questions. But the first question that it says, hey, you are shipping, to New York from Weston, and based on that, from Florida, based on that, we went ahead and calculated the composite sales tax rate for the city, for the state at 8.875. Okay, so that this is telling you, kind of explaining to you what it did. There's a little pencil button in the top, and I can click on the pencil button, and I can say, you know what? I am not shipping, and this is a really important thing. I'm going to say I'm not shipping this item. So even though the shipping address is in New York, I'm going to say I'm not shipping this item. If I click that I'm not shipping this item and click on save and continue, my sales tax rate will change, and it will default from my home state's sales tax, actually my county's sales tax. So because somebody's picking it up in my location and I have Nexus in my state, then it defaults to my retail location's address. So that's actually a really important piece of this whole thing. Now I'm gonna go ahead and close this and go back to it and edit it and change, put the fact that I am shipping it. Now for some strange weird reason, if you click I'm not shipping it and then you click on yes, it doesn't pre-populate the address for you. So I have to kind of like go back here and I already lost it. So I have to I have to go in there and I have to retype the shipping address again. So I'm gonna put here 1 Broadway, New York, New York. So I don't know if this is a problem with Google Chrome or a problem with this QuickBooks Online system, but if you actually by mistake say no and then go back to say yes, you have to retype the address in there. So that's something I kind of, it's called just kind of learning the hard way. I would check, right? Broadway Boulevard. So now it's telling me that it can't recognize the address. So that's another thing. This is a made up address. So let me take it out of here, and I'm gonna hit close. I'm gonna type it in the shipping address again. So Broadway Boulevard, and that's gonna be New York, New York. Okay, and then I'm gonna hit save, and I'm gonna go back to sales tax again. Notice that it automatically calculated the sales tax because I changed the shipping address. So this system is basically always monitoring the shipping address, and usually mostly is the zip code, and based on that zip code, it goes back and does that again. So that's another kind of key component of this whole thing. Now, down here it says tax categories and totals. If I click on the pencil button, this is where I can go item by item, click on the drop down, and then change that retail category and that subcategory that we were doing in the item list. And I can change it just for this specific invoice. So I can have a default category for that item in my item list, but then invoice by invoice, I can change this. And based on, depending on what it is, it may affect the sales tax. Like for example, I'm going to choose state flag, and then I'm going to click save and close. Okay, well, I guess, okay, so see what happened? It changed it to 0. I guess that in New York, if you're selling state flags, they're subsidized. You don't pay sales tax. Now that I didn't know. And honestly, I don't even know if this thing is accurate. So that's what I'm saying. It's I'm not a sales tax expert, but I'm just not very keen about how this whole system works. And I have a feeling that some people are having issues with this system, mostly because they're picking these random items and it's recalculating it based on the random item. So what I found, and as I mentioned this earlier, the item called taxable retail. Now I can't find this, and now it's not even searchable on this side. So yeah, the taxable retail is the one that's kind of like always works. So that's just kind of a trick there from the trade, what it is. Okay, and then there's also an option called override this amount. So if I click on override this amount, I can actually pick whatever rate I want. So I can put 6%, and then I put a reason. Now I haven't found a report that tells me all my overrides. So that I'm a little bit frustrated about that. That I can sit there and I can select a reason, but I can't pull a report that tells me every invoice in which I override it. Now this is cool. It tells me, hey, just so you know, we Intuit, we don't agree with this rate that you're putting, and this is different than my calculation. You can just confirm the override, and then you're fine. Okay, that's assuming that you want to do that. There's also a button here called Reset Recommended Value, which I love it. So you can go back to Reset Recommended Value, and it goes back to that. Now, notice in the top that it says this customer is not tax exempt. So I get a lot of questions about, quote, tax exempt. So we have to go through that. There's two ways to do tax exempt. Let me hit close for a second. Two ways to do tax exempt. One is you make the entire customer tax exempt, right? Or two, you just unmark. You just click on the little checkbox, right? So click on the little checkbox and unmark it taxable, and it will automatically remove the sales tax calculation, right? So as soon as you mark the item itself not taxable manually in the invoice or in the sales receipt, it will unmark it, and it would be like a tax exempt sale. Okay, so that's another important thing that you want to keep in mind. There's also, let's assume that the item by default is taxable. You don't want to click on that, but you do want to make the customer overall sales tax exempt. Then you can click on sales tax again on that little link for sales tax. And there's a little pencil up in the top where it says this customer is not tax exempt. So you can click on that little pencil, and you can click this customer is tax exempt, and it just makes the entire customer tax exempt. So I can just put here whatever, they're a charitable organization, and put a code if I want to, whatever happens to be. I hit save, and then it makes the entire customer tax exempt. I hit close, and then it doesn't even calculate sales tax, even if the checkbox for tax is checked. Okay, let me go back into sales tax and go back in that and unmark it tax exempt, and click on close so we can go back to normalcy. So I know that was a lot of clicking and a lot of doing, but I wanted to kind of walk you through every single button that was in there. That way you're armored with the knowledge of understanding all the moving parts of that particular area. Now let me go ahead and create another one. So I'm going to create an invoice here, and let's do a new customer, and I'm going to make this customer in California. So I don't know of One Main Street, and let's do Beverly Hills, California, 90210, because that's the only zip code I know in California. So that will work. And we'll go ahead and pick an item that's taxable, generally taxable. Let's make this $500. And you will notice that this will not charge any sales tax, because even though this is my customer is taxable, because the item's taxable in this state, I'm not set up for sales tax. Now, something that's pretty cool, it's up here. It says you're not set up to collect sales tax for this. If you need to collect sales tax, go to the settings and set it up. So it actually forces you to kind of think about, wait, should I set up sales tax in the state? So that's something to think about. Just something to think about overall. So I don't have to do anything at that point. I can just close that. This is a California sale. I don't have Nexus in that state, so I'm okay. Now, normally what you want to do is just uncheck the tax checkbox, so it doesn't say that it's a taxable sale and kind of confuse things. Okay. Now, shipping, just so you know, shipping overall, like if I enter something under shipping, shipping will never calculate sales tax. So if you use the shipping box to add shipping, shipping will always be excluded from sales tax. Now, you can still, if you want, if for whatever reason in your state you have to charge sales tax on the shipping, then you want to enter the shipping as a line item in the invoice. If you do shipping as a line item in the invoice or in the sales tax, I can choose whether or not I want to charge shipping on the on I mean sales tax on the shipping. But if I use the separate box that's here that QuickBooks gives me, then generally there wouldn't be tax on the shipping unless the QuickBooks Online system knows that for that state it is, right. So that's a whole nother issue. In Florida, most of the times it isn't. That's why it would do that. But it would separate tax and shipping if, in fact, there is tax and shipping on that particular state. So that gets hairy because it's obviously varies state by state. So let me go ahead and click on Save and New, and then I'm going to do one more sale. Here, I'm going to do this sale for a customer in Florida. So Florida wholesale, I'll create that one. Okay, and then I'll give it an address. Let's say it's 5000 Commercial Boulevard, Sunrise, Florida 33351. Okay. Okay, and then I'll create a product here, same product, the widget, and we'll make that $12,000. So you will notice it just usually kind of takes a second to kick in, and it will automatically calculate the sales tax. In this case, there's no shipping address, but it detected a billing address. So another really cool thing about this is if the billing address is there and the shipping address is not, it will automatically pick the billing address, right? At that point, you could choose whether the item's being shipped or not, but it really doesn't matter. Okay, I guess it would only matter if there's a different sales tax in a different county in the state. So I'm gonna go ahead and click. Let me show you. I put $100 in shipping. I'm going to put $100 in shipping here just so you see. Notice that in here, by default, it doesn't charge tax on shipping. Okay, just because in Florida, there's no tax on shipping. And we can discuss that in some other levels because there could be shipping based on whether the customer has the option to pick it up or not. I mean, that could all vary by state. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Save and Close. And now officially have a sale on each of the states. So let me click on, actually, it's about time to take a polling question. So let me run this one. Let me take a break. Let me drink some water, catch a breath here. And there are at least 80 questions in the questions box. I don't think I can get to any of them. I'm by myself today, so I don't know if I can address them. If you have a question and you want to email it to me, I'll gladly try to answer it. But I have an overwhelming amount of questions, and I knew it was going to happen because a sales tax episode would do this. So tons of questions here. So, but for example, Janice says, "What about discounts?" I assume Janice is asking, if I discount a product, will the discount take into effect the sales tax or not? So, Janice, my answer would be if you change the dollar value of the item at the line item level, then the discount would be applicable to the sales tax. If you add a separate line item as a discount in the invoice or in the sales receipt, if you mark it taxable, then it will take into consideration the reduction of price to charge tax. If you don't mark discounts taxable, then it wouldn't. So that's another one. Somebody says, "What about wholesalers?" Well, the answer is wholesalers typically you don't charge sales tax too because there will be resellers, but that's all circumstantial, of course. Let's see. Somebody says that sometimes discounts are affected or not affected. Look at the rules of discounts and coupons in New York. Again, that's all based on states. So I know it's very difficult to give to give that generic information. That would apply to all the states. Okay, so that's a really important piece. Okay. Someone says that they use California and it's not calculating for them directly. See, so there's a few people are complaining that the software is not working 100% for them. I appreciate what they're doing. I think they're going in a very interesting direction. And I doubt that a free service is going to be perfect. So I venture to say that QuickBooks will probably go into some sort of paid premium service for sales tax calculation, so they can also take the liability for doing this incorrectly. Because right now they don't charge for that, so they probably not want to take any of the liability for that. So that's what I would think. All right, let me go ahead and hit a close poll. I'll share the results real quick with you, see if you find this interesting. So 25% of you use some other external system, QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. 29% of you do it manually or don't deal with sales tax at all. 20% of you are using QuickBooks Online. 20% of you are using QuickBooks Desktop. So that's about right. That result looks about right. Okay, so we've done that. Let's talk about making the sales tax payment. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go into taxes, and that's going to take me straight into here. You're going to see that I have my liability for Florida and my liability for New York. It tells me which month I'm working on for this calculation. This is September, and it tells me the due date. So apparently New York and Florida have the same due date for monthly sales tax forms. Okay, I didn't know that. That's cool. Here it says terms of service. I actually like this right here. If you click on terms of service, I think it's important to let everyone know what's what's the agreement that you have with Intuit here. And if you go all the way down somewhere here, I gotta figure out where it is. It actually says that Intuit provides a sales tax calculation but takes absolutely no liability over, I forget where it is, right here. Right here. Intuit is not liable for calculating or correctly or incorrectly. You have the right to make your own corrections, right? So this is saying that we're doing the best we can. We're going to give you a number, but we're not taking any liability if this is wrong. Okay, so that's actually really important. And it says if there is a liability, the liability would be whatever you pay QuickBooks Online. So the $35 a month for QuickBooks Essentials or whatever will probably be the only liability that would have. So I actually find it. I read that agreement, by the way, pretty standard legalese. But I think it's important to do that, especially because if you have a client, assuming that most of you are accounting professionals, that don't want to pay for a sales tax consulting tax preparation service because, quote, QuickBooks does it for me, I think it's important that they read that and say, well, they don't do it for you. They kind of do it for you. And you make a mistake, it's still your fault, right? So so that's it. And the other piece is I get this question a lot: is QuickBooks doing electronic filing of sales tax forms? As far as I know, the answer is no. I assume that they're going to move to that direction, but again, if they do that, that will probably be a paid service, just like Avalara. Avalara charges for that type of service. Okay, so let's start now doing the process of paying the taxes. So you're going to see up here where it says sales tax settings in the top, and I can click on that, and this is where I can add multiple agencies. So if I were to add California, for example, it would add that agency, but I would have to then go back in the invoice and adjust the sales tax on that. Okay, but these are the only two states that I have Nexus in. So I did have a California sale that's not included here at all. So I'm going to click on View Return here where it says Florida, and this is not really the return. This is the data that typically goes in the return. That's different than a return. A return looks like something else. Okay, completely something else. Okay, so it's telling me my gross sales, and notice that probably includes my out-of-state sales, and that includes my shipping. And then we have the taxable sales, which is only the ones that are eligible for tax. So this is actually including my out-of-state sales in here, and my non-taxable sales. Okay. Now let's say, for example, that I'm going to go ahead and pay this, and because I'm paying it in time, I'm going to get, let's say, a $30 credit from the state. So I don't actually have to pay $720. I only really have to pay $690. So I'm going to click on Add Adjustment. Okay, so I'm going to click on Add Adjustment right there. I'm going to click on that, and a new window will pop up, and then I'm able to put the reason. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to get a credit. Okay, and the account, remember we set that up before, we're going to put it under, whoops, where's my account? Okay, so I created it as an other income account, and it doesn't let me do it. And this is something that kind of ticks me off about this, because in QuickBooks Online I can. So it has to be a regular income account. So I'll take that back. The credit has to be a regular income account. So I'll pick something else, maybe other, and that would allow me to take, well, actually, none of these. This caught me by surprise. None of these are actually allowing me to use an other expense account. So I'm going to hit X for a second, and good thing that this happened so that way you know. I'm going to go back into my chart of accounts and my credit allowance. I have to make that an income account, a regular income account. So that's too bad. For some reason, the system doesn't let me choose an other income account, which should have tested it before. Maybe I'm used to desktop. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of what does what. So I'm going to go back to the view return. I'm going to do the adjustment. Okay, so I'm going to do the adjustment, and then I'm going to select credit, and then I'm going to pick the income account, which is not showing there. Probably hasn't refreshed yet. Let me just pick. I'm going to pick this one for a second, and then I'm going to put here $30. And this adjustment, it could be negative or it could be positive. Okay, so that's actually a really important thing. So because it's a credit, this will be positive. If it was something else, it would be negative. So that's an important piece about that. So negative or positive is the direction that we think about it, but QuickBooks will make a negative or positive based on the reason. So I'm going to click on add. So now that should make my sales tax liability 690. There it is. And that's actually how I'm going to make the payment. So I'm going to click on select filing method, and notice that there's a button that says e-file. So it just looks to me that there's the intention to do that. So there's an intention to do an e-filing system of some sort. But for now, I'll say file manually, and there's really nothing to file. This is just giving you the information that you need. Then you're gonna pick the bank account. So let's say I pay this today. I'm gonna pick the bank account that I'm gonna pay from, which I haven't created yet. So let me create it real quick. Let me just create a bank account here. So I'm gonna select the bank account that I'm gonna pay from, and I'm gonna click on record payment. Let's just make this very clear. This is not electronically paying anything. This is not electronically filing anything. You're filing by hand or with some other software, and you're paying with a check or digitally through their website, and simply you're recording the payment so it shows up in your books. So I'm going to click on record payment, and that should close the cycle on that. So you just have a quick summary. Now, this doesn't have a print button that also kind of takes me off. So I just kind of hit Control P on the keyboard and kind of do a print screen on these. Hey, this is good enough, I would say. But I wish there was a print button there. Uh, I wish they would actually ask me about these things and tell me, hey, what's missing here? I would say a print button. But man, these people are into it sometimes. it's like pulling hairs over there. Okay, so you got that. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on back to Sales Tax Center, and that should close the cycle. It will remove that from my liability, and now I have the New York one. Okay, so I can click on View Return, and in this case, let's say I'm gonna pay late and I'm gonna pay with a penalty. So I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna do adjustment, and then I'm gonna do a penalty. Now I should have an account for penalties. I don't have in this case. I don't think in this chart of accounts. No, I don't. So I'm gonna put it under bank service charges. You probably should have an account for penalties. And by the way, one thing that kind of ticks me off about not being able to do another expense is I usually create penalties as an other expense because it's not tax deductible. So I need I just into it. If you're watching, I need I be able to access my other expense and my other income accounts for this. There should be no reason where you're restricting it to only regular income or expense accounts. So that's my rant. Let me go ahead and put $50. Let's say I'm paying a $50 penalty for filing late, whatever it happens to be, and I click on add. So now we're going the other way, right? I'm going to pay more that I owe because it's a late penalty. Then I'll click on select filing method. Again, it looks like there's an intention of some sort to have an e-file system at some point. I'm going to click on file manually, select the date that I paid it. Let's say I paid this on the 24th, and I'll pick my bank account, and then I'll click on record payment. So that's going to record two sales tax liability checks into my checking account, and that should all be reconciled and all that stuff at some point, right? Now, there's a couple of important things here. We have history, this history button here, okay? And I honestly, sorry, and the history button, just go back. When you click on the history button, it basically shows you what you've done before. So it's like an archive. It's like, which which sales tax forms have I done. I can click on view return, but I can't view the actual return. It's just a form for me to do that. Now I wish, and this is something I also wish I can get QuickBooks to here. I wish I could attach the actual PDF of the return that I'm sending the government, so I have a place to put it. Now, you can attach it anywhere else, but I think the logical place to attach it would be there. So I wish I could attach it here, but that's just not available yet. Again, I think Intuit's intention is to kind of become a sales tax service like the way they do with payroll, and at some point be a full service type of thing. Now I'm going to click on reports and show you the two reports. This is actually really important. The two reports are going to be the sales tax liability report, and I'm going to go back to last month here. This is all based on last month. And I can see my two sales tax liabilities. I got my Florida one totaled, and then I have my New York totaled, even with the sub accounts, which is pretty cool. So there's like a sub account for each of the counties. I can actually collapse it if I don't want to see any of the subs, so I can want to see them as a whole. So I actually like that a lot. And taxable amount would be, your taxable sales. And then the other report, let me go back. Let me click on taxes again. And the other report here is the taxable customer report. It's actually a pretty interesting report. It actually gives me a list of all my customers and which ones are marked as taxable or not. If you remember, there was one customer in particular that we marked as tax exempt. So that's what that would be. And if I click on any of them, it would take me to the specific customer where I can click on edit. And then from here, I can, where is it? Tax info. From here, I can check whether they're going to be tax exempt or not. So I can actually make the whole customer tax exempt or not if I wanted to. Okay. Um, I think I've covered it all. In a nutshell, I mean, there's obviously a lot more to cover, but I think I've covered all in terms of how sales tax works. Now, some of the sales tax troubleshooting issues, like like uh, um, we paid the wrong amount and we wrote checks. My take would be just delete those checks and remake them correctly, follow the process through this, but I really just don't have time to cover that. So let me run the third polling question here, because we're going to have Avalara on next week. It's next week. We're going to have Avalara on, and we're going to talk about Avatax, and you're going to be able to compare how the new QuickBooks Online built-in sales tax calculation system works versus Avalara's, which is been in the market forever, and this is what they do, and they do take responsibility over the calculation. So usually you go with Avalara when you take sales tax really serious, and you do want kind of like a big company. Avalara is like the ADP of sales tax. I think that's probably the best way um, to mention. So once you actually see Avatax and you see how it works and how it integrates with QuickBooks Online or desktop, it's actually very similar. It's all based on county, based on state, based on the product type. But they have a really, really solid system, especially if you got e-commerce clients selling stuff in Amazon, and we're dealing with what we call the post-Wayfair world, which is after the Supreme Court ruling of Wayfair versus North or South Dakota. I forget which of the Dakotas. Anyone could potentially be liable to pay sales tax in any state, regardless of you know physical presence. So I personally believe, if you're an accounting professional, that this and next year is the year of adding sales tax to your practice. Sales tax will be a very profitable and very demanded part of accounting services, because all of a sudden sales tax, it's in everybody's radar, and more and more businesses are moving to e-commerce. And once you do e-commerce, I think all bets are off. So go ahead and answer that last polling question. So we got a polling question up. It's been up for about 2 minutes. We have 87% of the votes. Let me go ahead and close that polling question and show the results. 9% of you says, "What is Avalara?" So maybe you'll find out next week. And a few of you, 5%, used it and loved it. Four of you, it didn't work for you. I would love if you can email me and tell me what didn't work. I would love to figure that out, because I'm always looking, understanding our providers and our sponsors and the value that they bring. And a few of you don't deal with sales tax or haven't tried it yet. Okay, perfect. All right, so I think we'll cut it at that on the content. We'll have one more polling question coming up. Let me see if any other questions are worth answering. And by the way, all questions are worth answering. It's just that it's so many of them. All right, somebody's asking, what is the new threshold post Wayfair? So what happened with Wayfair, real quick? What happened with Wayfair is the state of North or South Carolina, I forget which one, I mean, Dakota, I forgot which one it is, determined that if you sell 200 transactions in the whole year or 100,000 transactions, you're liable to pay sales tax on that state. Now, generally speaking, states cannot infringe in interstate commerce. So they can't demand me, a Florida based company, to pay sales tax in Dakota because I don't have physical presence. So they sued a company called Wayfair, and this lawsuit went all the way to the Supreme Court. And our not so smart Supreme Court decided that in favor of the state and said, yeah, you know what, the state's right. The state can set up their own, their own rules with sales tax, even if there's no physical presence, called the economic nexus. And according to that state, is $100,000 worth of transactions or 200 transactions units, regardless of the dollar value. Jeff is saying South Dakota. Thank you. So because of that, now every state, I venture to say, every state is going to try to find a way of getting money from e-commerce companies, even if they have no physical presence. So that's just like a really important piece of this whole thing. Another question that says, I think it's a question and a comment that says, this whole thing based on cash basis or accrual basis? Cindy, great question. QuickBooks Online, the new system only calculates in accrual basis. So it will calculate invoices based on invoice date, not based on payment date. Great question. Thank you for asking that. I think that's really important one to keep in mind. Some people are calculating about being able to delete sales tax payments once they're created. Yeah, I heard about that, but I have not had the issue myself. Okay. All right. So let's go over what's going on in the next 3 months. Pay attention. Please don't leave. A couple exciting things happening down the pipeline. One, I pulled everybody from the email distribution list. I got about 400 responses back. And overwhelmingly, the biggest feedback was, I want to know what the topics are ahead of time, right? For QB Power Hour listeners, being surprised with the topic the day off was very frustrating. So I took the feedback by heart. By the way, the reason is planning and also running a business, right? Because QB Power Hour is kind of a nonprofit business for us, unless we have sponsors, of course. So a lot of these times we just do these things kind of a day before. But we went ahead and sat down and we planned the whole year. So we're pretty sure this is going to be the schedule. Next week we'll cover Avatax. November 1st we'll talk about creating options and offering packages. November 8th we'll bring Avalara back to show a different product called Trust File and possibly their Airbnb type of product for people that rent property, so that they have it. If we have time, we'll cover that. On the 15th, we'll do a post QB Connect show. So everything new that's coming in from the QuickBooks Connect, there's going to be tons of announcements. November 6th, there'll be tons of announcements about QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Online Accountant, QuickBooks Online Ecosystem. They save all the beefy announcements for November 6th. So on November 15th, I will bring in a summary of all that stuff that we learned from the conference. And for the folks that don't go to the conference, this will be sort of like a post QB Connect show. So what's new in QuickBooks Online and online ecosystem. On the 29th, we have nothing. So it could be anything. So we don't know. Maybe we'll save the spot for a sponsor. And then on the 13th, I'm going to do a deep dive on QuickBooks Enterprise mobile support. Right? So how to use the Android-based app to receive purchase orders, to fulfill sales orders, to do inventory management and cycle count. So hopefully there'll be a major update in the next 2 months that'll be worth showing. And then on the 27th, before year end, we'll do a webinar called QuickBooks at year end, which I think makes the most sense. That this will be the fifth one that we've done. So every single year we do QuickBooks at year end. If you actually search in YouTube, there's 4 editions of QuickBooks at year end. So every year we try to bring something new. On the other side is I have a couple of things happening as well. I'm also very busy in the webinar world. We're going to have a webinar in an hour, basically, if you're watching live. It's called Video Marketing for Accountants. It's part of a series that I've done in the last year. We're going to do a deep dive into YouTube analytics. I actually tricked a YouTube consultant into giving me free advice and I'm gonna put him in a webinar. So he's gonna critique and advise my webinar, my YouTube channel live in front of everybody, as a way for you to kind of know, what does how to use YouTube analytics and YouTube intelligence to improve your video marketing. So that should be pretty fun. And let's go ahead, and we have the last polling question here. So I'm gonna run the last polling question real quick, but just give me one more minute. So then we're gonna do Tax Power Hour on November 7th. And we're going to talk about the 20% taxable income deduction from the 2018 tax reform. On November 2nd, I'm going to have a 3-hour small group, about 50 people, value pricing webinar. If you want to know more about that, go to valuepricing.net. I have a free podcast in Facebook called Art of Advisory. Just search for Art of Advisory in Facebook. And absolutely, if you still have time to plan, try to make it into QuickBooks Connect next month in San Jose, California, QuickBooksConnect.com. Let me run the last polling question for the folks that want their CP certificate, and then we'll wrap up with just one more slide at the end after we get the polling questions. Meanwhile, the polling questions are up. Let me answer a couple of more questions. Somebody says, what if I wrote this is accrual basis. So what if I wrote an invoice 2 months ago and I paid my sales tax and then the invoice wasn't paid? What is the proper way to write off the invoice? So the proper way is not to write off the invoice, is to create a credit memo with a taxable item, so you reverse the sales tax effect, because technically you want to get a discount on your sales tax because you never got paid and you paid ahead of time. Remember, with accrual basis sales tax, you'll be paying sales tax before you get paid. Okay. And this is actually the fifth polling question, by the way. So if you got 3 out of the 5, it's good enough. Yeah, perfect. Somebody says, I'm in Florence, Italy. I love your content. Keith, thank you, man. That's awesome. I love to know that people are outside of the States and Canada watching these webinars live. I wonder what time is in Italy. Probably like 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, how do I get my CPA certificate? It'll be emailed to you. You'll know. It'll be emailed to you. How do I get the recording? So I'm tired of people asking me, where do I get the recording, or how do I get the recording? Is this thing going to be recorded? YouTube. Go to YouTube and search it. Okay, it takes me a couple hours to pull it up there, but usually within a day, stuff goes up. Okay, 2 minutes in, let's go ahead and close the polling question. It looks like for a lot of you, this was new. For some of you, this was not relevant, right? That makes sense because you don't do any sales tax, and 1% of you are disappointed with the content. They can't win them all. Uh, all right, thank you guys. So I'd like to thank one more time. I'd like to thank Avalara, the most popular app or service to manage multi-state sales tax. If you're excited about that, come next week. Check out Avalara's demo on Avatax. And thank you, Avalara, for being a sponsor. Sponsors is how we keep the show alive. If you're a fan of QB Power Hour and you know vendors that would want to demo their product here and obviously pay for that, they can contact me at qbpowerhour@gmail.com. Go ahead and refer them over. If you have good relationship with vendors, email them and say, you got to be at QB Power Hour. You got to pay the big bucks. But it's a great venue to showcase your software and do a demo. All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and click on end record, and we'll finish it up. Thank you very much, guys, and have a wonderful day.